I'm an entrepreneur. So I've never had to rely on conversation with people. I've never really brought people into my world, especially if I've been going through something. And there was a point when things happened that I just realized I cannot do this alone. I have to look at the people who are around me, who are wanting to support me. They're wanting to be there for me. And I have to take advantage of that, or else I don't know that I would have made it through some of those situations.
Asia, it's great to have you on the Dream Lifestyle podcast. How are you doing?
I am great. It's definitely great to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Listen, I know we have a great conversation lined up and planned, but just to start, just kind of introduce yourself, where you're at, what you're doing, just so that way people can be familiar with you.
Well, my name is Ashia Carpenter. I am an entrepreneur located in Atlanta, Georgia. I own Divine Dance Studio. I have owned a dance studio for 10 years. I also have asiaonline.com, where I mentor and coach people how to take their passion and turn it into a profitable business.
I love it. I love it. So, needless to say, you're busy. Things keep you busy.
Very
Needless to
busy.
say.
Very
I love
busy.
it. I love it. Well, so one of the things that, I always like to ask people when they come on the show is, when did you start building your dream lifestyle?
So coincidentally, I will say I started building my dream lifestyle when I was 3 years old. And I know that sounds really crazy, but that's when I started dance and gymnastics classes. That's when I developed a passion, and that's where it all started. I knew from a very young age, before I graduated high school, that I wanted to own a dance studio and I wanted to help the next generation through dance. I knew I wanted to be that mentor for them. I had really great mentors around me. So I will say I started building that dream lifestyle when I was a child. Now, as far as actually getting into the business and working on the business side of things, when I was in college, I majored in child and family studies, and then I got my master's in business administration. I quickly realized that it's going to be a constant learning process. But as soon as I graduated with my master's is when I started my dance studio business. So the same month.
Wow. So that is so cool because it sounds like from 3 years old, if I'm understanding, from 3 years old, you basically like knew what you wanted to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow. So there's kind of like that journey.
Yeah, dance was definitely that journey. There was never a time where I paused dance, where I quit, where I took a break. It was once I started when I was 3 and I haven't stopped since. So
Wow. That's phenomenal. And I mean, obviously with where you are today, that decision to start building your dream lifestyle from 3 years old, from like point A to where you are, and I know you have so much more that you want to do, and I believe you will do. I'm certain that that journey was filled with a lot of transition. And the reason why I'm pivoting there is because, a lot of times when we have a big dream, we have a big goal, we immediately see the mountaintop and we see where we are, and we could be motivated, we could get the skills, we can figure out, strategize, and everything like that. But if we're being honest, life will throw us some curves. There will be changes. And the mistake that I believe a lot of dreamers make is that we only want change on our terms. Um, and I'm sure we could go for hours just talking about like how we want to change on our own terms. But for you, in your experience with transition, what was that like for you? Just as you, like you said, you started building your dream lifestyle really when you were 3 years old to the point you're at now. Like, what's your experience with transitions in the middle of that entire journey?
well, I will say, like I said, I did know exactly what I wanted to do, and because I knew that end goal, I was willing to transition. So transitions are something that I kind of take head on. I don't know if you've read the book Who Moved My Cheese, but that's always been in the back of my head when I'm transitioning. But some of the transitions that I've gone through have been major, including completely relocating my dance studio 4 years after I started it to a different state, which obviously it's a dance studio. So my clients couldn't come with me. So I essentially restarted my entire business, went through that transition, went through a really rough time renovating and having that building in place, went through a car crashing through that building, transitioned through COVID right after that. And then right after COVID was complete, a couple years after that, went through a divorce. So all of those things greatly impacted my business, taught me how to pivot, taught me how to transition, but I still kept that end goal in mind.
Oh my gosh. So that's like the ringer. I like, okay. So that's a lot. And that's in the span of, if I'm hearing this correctly, how long, how much time
I
between?
would say the first major transition of moving to a different state was in 2018, and the last major transition would be the divorce, which was 2022. So within 4 years.
4 years. So within 4 years, obviously, like you said, that uprooting of a business from Tennessee to Atlanta, which I can imagine is scary. Then you're dealing with, you said a car drove through the studio?
Through my studio 4 months after I finished renovations and opened.
And I mean, I don't even know what emotion you could attach to that. What was that like? Can you let us in on like what was the emotion of that?
I will. I will say, first of all, the piece that I don't tell a lot of people is that I was actually supposed to be there sitting in the exact chair that the car crashed through at the moment that it did.
Wow.
Someone had told me, don't go to work. And if you know me, that's very rare. I do not take days off. And I had just gotten back in town and I was like, okay, Asia, rest your body. Do not go to work. I had to force myself to stay in bed. And as I'm in bed, I get notifications someone's in your building. And of course, I'm panicked thinking someone broke in, but then I can see that there's a car in my building. I, of course, rush up there. And my neighbor, the first thing that happened, my neighbor, who I think it was a car dealership beside me, his wife came out and just gave me a hug and was like, I was trying to call you. I couldn't stop crying. I was just distraught. All you can see is this thing that you've built in front of you crumbled literally to the ground. And an entire car. And I think when I say that, people think that the car hit the building. No, whatever scene you're picturing in your head about a car sticking out of a building, that's what happened. Completely in my office, completely in the lobby. And I just couldn't stop crying. I was just like, what, why would this happen? Why would this happen to me right after I rebuilt it? So,
Oh my gosh. So I think as you were saying that, the word that kept coming to my mind was like sobering.
mhm.
Like the initial, it's like shock, right? When you know you find out like literally car in my building, like I see what I built, car shock. But then to what you said about, like you were going to be there in the seat, like I can imagine that being a very sobering thought.
It was. I couldn't believe it because the fact of the matter is, right where the seat was, the car hit and pushed all the way across the room. And I wouldn't be here. I have no doubt I
Wow.
would. Dude, I think that I wouldn't be alive because of the impact that it had. And I've seen videos of it actually happening and the speed that it was going. It actually went down a hill into the building. And yeah, I
Oh
wouldn't be
wow.
here. So.
Wow. That yeah, so sobering's right. And I have a very similar experience with just a car accident, which you said you went through a car accident as well, right? Like just where again, just a sobering thought of like, man, one different decision, one different move, and I might not be here. And then in terms of like our timeline of transition for you, you said you're divorced in 2022. With all of these experiences and these major transitions, because I mean, I feel like when most of the time when people use the word transition, uh I how can I say it? I believe that there should be like a threshold when we talk about the difficulty of transition. You know what I mean? Because it's like people will say, "Oh, I'm in a transition." It's like you got fired from your job because you
Yeah.
didn't perform. Like that's like yes, it's transition because yes, we want you to figure it out and everything. But like we're not going to compare that transition of like poor stewardship of your job to like something unthinkable like a car driving through your business. like we're not going to compare the two as if they're the same.
I will
Um,
say, and let me correct myself. The divorce began in 2022. It was finalized 2024, but
Fine. Okay.
negotiation did
Got
begin.
you. So even then, that's like an extended transit because again, I'm certain just that process is a lot, both I'm sure mentally, spiritually, like, and we're gonna get into it. And so with all of your experiences with these transitions, these major transitions that literally I think most people would say they usually have like 1 to 2 of those in their lifestyle or lifetime, and you had or you had basically 4 of them in 4 years. Uh, can you talk with me about just like what those experiences, now you're on the other side of those things and you're thriving, you're doing amazing. What would you say those experiences and you getting through those transitions, what would you say it produced in you when you just think about how you lead yourself now?
I would say it produced so much resiliency and just grit because, of course, I knew what it would take to be an entrepreneur, but the things that I went through, even within the transitions that I had no idea what would happen, produced something in me that I would say is unstoppable now. And there's nothing that I feel like I can't accomplish. There's nothing that I feel like would stop me and my motivation and my vision that I have for my life. So those were the two words that come to mind is just grit and resiliency.
Yeah. And I love those two words because I do believe they speak to every dreamer's ability and the necessity to be able to operate in the unknown. Like I think any person who has a goal, a dream, whether it's a business, whether it's a family, like it doesn't even matter. Like you have to be able to operate when you aren't sure if your strategy, plan, whatever is going to work. Like,
Yeah.
and
And
it, no, go ahead,
sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say what's even more difficult about that, thinking in those terms, is you have to put everything into it as if it is going to work, which can be so scary because, especially if you're doing it and you're an entrepreneur, you're doing everything yourself. It's always the battle of do I put more into it or do I need to walk away? Because it could have been very easy to walk away at the car crash. It could have been very easy to just shut everything down and go get a job during the divorce. But it was like, okay, well, what do you ultimately want? So.
Talk with me a little bit about that because I think that step right there, I don't want to breeze over that. Where like, and we are going to get tactical, but that concept of okay, I'm in the middle of uncertainty. I don't know if this is going to work, but I have to still show up like I believe it is. That refocusing on what you really want, like just using the language you use, like, and I would say just refocusing on the dream lifestyle, refocusing on just in your context, Divine Dance Studios, like what you're building. Talk with me about how important that step was, and talk about how important that step was just for you personally, but then talk about it generally in terms of how important that step is for just dreamers who navigate transition.
Well, I was actually speaking about this the other day because I was talking about Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. I
Mhm.
don't know if that, but that is something that just I always kept in my heart, always kept on my mind. Why do you want to do this? Because if it was purely for money, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. If it was purely just for money, because there's so much that goes into having your own business and having a program in general that you have to be in love with what you do. And during those hard times, I have to reflect and say, what is it that I love about what I'm doing? And what is it that I ultimately want? Which I will say is extremely difficult because a lot of my dream and my dream life and my vision for my life was incorporated around family and around husband and around future kids and having the dance studio incorporated with that. So I almost had to transition that ultimate goal and what vision I had for myself, but I still had to keep in mind the goal that I had for myself as far as mentoring kids and being a dance studio owner. So it was very difficult, but just focusing on that and making sure that I'm always realizing why I'm doing something is one of the things that helped the most.
That's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that because I think one of the traps that a lot of dreamers fall into when they experience, unexpected trouble or, these transitions, it's that they feel like there's an abandoning of the goal. They feel as though like all hope is lost. And I usually would like to just reposition it and just shift in perspective where it's like, no, this is just a pruning where, and you said it where, you visioned your family, kids and all those things, which will still happen for you. But the timeline is now different because of these transitions. But now you now have a deeper understanding of your why because of the transition. The trap that most dreamers fall into is that they feel like, oh, all hope is lost. Like what I thought was going to be now, it's impossible. When it's like, no, you now have an opportunity to truly understand the true why. Like, okay, you had this plan and it was well thought out, it was meticulous, it was specific and all these things. But now life has happened. And now it's you are left with basically you and your thoughts to really get down to the bottom of no, why do I even want this? What will be my motivating factor? What is the purpose? What's the impact? What's the difference that I want to make in this space? Right. And I think that's super important. And again, it just all boils down to what you said earlier about like that refocusing of, okay, no, let's get back to the heart of why did I start? Let's get back to the heart of, why I'm doing what I'm doing. Cause I'm certain, and please tell me if I'm wrong or tell me if you did this, like you were in the middle of those transitions. I'm certain you thought back to you being, 3 years old. You thought back to when you were like 7 and you're like, no, like, what would that, like, why did that little girl like want to go through this? Like, why would she keep going? You know?
Yeah.
Um,
What did
but-
she need? Most importantly, like what did she need and what was she missing and what were her studio owners and dance teachers providing and how
wow.
can I do that for my students? So yeah, I definitely had that in my mind at all times, and I had to make sure that I was focused, hyper focused on that, or else things would have just diminished and eventually went away.
Absolutely. So I want to go kind of into how you got through it, because we talked about, how transition happens. We all have a dream, we have a goal, and it is a journey. And in any journey, there's going to be shifts, there's going to be unexpected challenges and things like that. And it is up to us as dreamers to be mature enough to not basically fall apart when these seasons of transition happens. For you and your experience, when you talk about, basically moving your business from Tennessee to Atlanta now, and, car going through and another car accident and divorce and all these things, which are their own, they are their own processes in the middle of it, right? So you're still obviously running your business in the middle of these things. Can you talk with us about just how, like, what were some of the things that you did in the midst of the transition?
Yeah. I will say, first of all, I had to make sure that was constantly reflecting within myself, because a lot of those are unforeseen circumstances. But I also had to ask myself, okay, so what did you do to get into this position? What can you do to make this better? And how can you get yourself out of this and get to the other side? So personal reflection in the form of journaling, therapy, making sure that I was constantly in church, making sure that I was always reevaluating my goals, my why, what I was doing, was a big step in just making sure that I handled everything and got through those transitions seamlessly. And then using my support system. So for me, I grew up an only child. I'm an entrepreneur. So I've never had to rely on conversation with people. I've never really brought people into my world, especially if I've been going through something. And there was a point when things happened that I just realized I cannot do this alone. I have to look at the people who are around me, who are wanting to support me. They're wanting to be there for me. And I have to take advantage of that, or else I don't know that I would have made it through some of those situations. So just utilizing that support system, which includes being vulnerable, it includes asking for help, it includes telling people where you are in your process, is something that I would say made a huge difference in what I was going through in all of those situations.
I love that. I want to go back to the beginning of what you said, because I feel like you hit on something key, and I'm synthesizing a little bit, but it sounds like you asked yourself some key questions, like key reflection questions in the period of transition. What were some of those questions that you asked yourself to kind of keep yourself going through it?
Yeah, of course. So one of the main questions I always ask myself when I'm going through something is, what could I have done to prevent this? And what can I do to prevent this from happening in the future? So obviously there are things, so for example, with the car accident, I couldn't have helped that. That was something that I probably wouldn't have been able to have much control over, but I would say to myself, okay, what are we doing and how did we get into this situation? And how, if we get into this situation in the future, can we make it a little bit easier? Luckily, I had insurance. After that situation happened, I made sure to increase the insurance that I had. And definitely grateful for that, because that did help out a lot. Another question that I ask myself all the time is, in 5 years, will this matter? Will this situation matter in 5 years? So something like a car crashing through your business, yes, that's a huge thing, but it has now been 5 years, around 5 years since that happened. And no, it doesn't matter. I'm still standing. I still have an amazing business. We rebuilt everything. That didn't stop anything. If anything, it helped because people saw it on the news and they knew about the business now. But I always like to keep that in mind. In 5 years, will this matter?
Wow.
And if not, let's just take some of the pressure off and figure out how to get through it. So
That's really good. And what I like about just those questions, and I feel like everyone has like their own questions, right? That they should, ask themselves. But I think there always need to be some sort of key questions that we ask ourselves in just tough moments. Like, right, just because transition is, we're talking about like a period of time, but you might have like moments, but you always have to ask yourself basically like productive questions. Like, okay, what can I do right now that just is productive? To just right now, right? Because, we're human. When these types of things happen, we want to just get in bed, close the door, shut off the lights. I'm done. Like that's just like our natural like response to things. And for us as business owners, right? You have parents relying on you, you have kids relying on you, you got bills to pay, you got family and things like that. Whereas like I have to just do what I can. To be intentional with, okay, keeping myself in line. And I don't want to necessarily dumb it down to just like you prioritize your self-care, because I feel like you
No,
were way more intentional than that.
I was, but I actually have a great point to make with that because that's something that was very important to me. And I don't have children, but I would say to myself almost daily, take care of yourself as if you are your own child. Make sure that you're getting up, you're going to work, you're doing what you need to do. And it might be a situation where if you had a child that was crying, okay, you would give them grace. Give yourself grace. Make sure that you're eating, make sure that you're getting up, all of the things that you would say to a child who is going through a hard moment. That's what I would say to myself. But I also made sure that I was taking accountability. And that brings us back to what I was saying about asking, what could I have done to prevent this? Because that's going to cause you to really reevaluate your position in things and put in the work to get out of that situation. So I definitely think that helped.
Yeah. No, no, and so let me ask you this. Was it hard for you to admit that you needed help? And let me ask you, let me explain why I'm asking that question. Because I think so often when we're just used to doing hard things and we're used to, excelling and achieving and things like that, where we're just used to white knuckling it. Like we're just used to like, it doesn't matter how I feel, like it'll be all right. I'll be fine. Let's achieve the mission, right? There's things at stake we got to get done. And you're in the middle of this transition that's literally just like, who the heck deals with this, right? And it's either like, who the heck deals with this, or it's like, this is extremely, extremely painful. Was it hard for you to even admit to yourself, like, yeah, I need support? Like, was that hard for you? What was that
I will
process?
say yes and no. So, in a lot of those situations, before I even felt the impact of what was happening, I made sure I was in therapy. I made sure I was going to church, made sure I was doing the things that knew I needed to do. So, I could predict that I was going to need those things before it came. But I will say that I didn't know to the extent that I would need the community part of it because in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm going to pay someone to talk to them. I'm going to, utilize church, which isn't going to really cause me to grow as a person and ask for help. I'm just getting what I need and getting the word. But I will say, as far as face-to-face conversation with the people that were around me that relied on me, it was tough. And it was a situation where I can do this myself. I can white knuckle it, but alone I can only go so far. So if you want to go further, you're going to have to utilize the people around you and you're going to have to take advantage of the people who are asking, are you okay? Do you need help with anything? And so many times I would be like, no, I'm good. Until it got to the point where I actually have one of my teachers who would say to me, stop saying it's fine. Stop saying you don't need help. I am here. And I was just like, okay, well, you're right. I'm not fine. I do need help. We can get a lot further and we can get this done a lot easier with more than one person. So let's do it. And it was more so a learning process. And now that I have, and I still have a ways to go, don't get me wrong. But now that I have, properly utilized that community, utilize that help, delegate my task, now it's more so I'm pushing the limits and the boundaries. I'm like, okay, can you help me with this too? Can you do this? Can you be here for me? And I mean, it's a beautiful thing because like I said, I did want to start this business because of community, because of mentorship. And I didn't realize that I would also have that lesson and how important those things were to me. So
That's so good. It's like you mentioned earlier, just surrounding community, the need for you to be vulnerable. Can you talk with me about just your process in being vulnerable, trusting other people with, we'll just say, your stuff, with your emotions, with your pains? Talk with somebody just how they can go through that, because I imagine there's a lot of people out there who they're going through a rough time. They're in transition, but they're having a hard time of trusting. They're having a hard time of, okay, I want to be vulnerable, but I just don't know how because I'm used to fighting. I'm used to, if I share, then you're going to look at me different, or I'm sharing and you're going to tell my audience. And like, how can someone be vulnerable so that way they can get healthy, so they can lead themselves through the transition? But yeah, just how? What's the how?
So I will say it was very tough. And just because I'm used to being high achieving, high functioning, always having my ducks in a row. So it was tough to admit, like, I'm not in the best place. I need help. So I will say, as far as just being vulnerable, for me, I never had to deal with a lot of scrutiny with things, and things kind of just fell into place up until, I will say, that move and that transition of moving my business. So I was actually telling someone this the other day. I was like, I feel like I used to be a lot more open and I would tell people what was going on because I didn't have that fear of judgment. And then when everything happened, that's when I started kind of clamming up and just, oh, I don't want to say this. I don't want to say this. I don't want to let people know that I'm in a bad place. And until like I said, I was forced to. And I would say the first thing that I had to do was just realize that people are not against you. People are there to help you. And I'm in a situation where I'm very lucky and I have a lot of people that are supportive around me. And I just had to first let them know how much I appreciated them, which I think opens that door for vulnerability. But then, like I said, just telling them, okay, some days are harder than others. I'm still getting through this. And most people understand, even if they haven't directly been through that type of situation, because they've been through things that you have may not have been through. So I think everyone has that empathy piece and they're able to kind of put themselves in your shoes. So just doing that and making sure I kept that line of communication open and let people know how I was feeling.
Wow. There's something you said that I wrote down I thought was so good. You said appreciation opens the door to vulnerability. That's
Yeah.
so good. Like
Yeah.
I just have to like acknowledge that, just because I think so often, again, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a business relationship, like we're just used to kind of like being on the treadmill. Like we're just going, we're going, where we don't take enough time to appreciate our friendships. We don't appreciate our relationships, clients, where it's like, no, if we take the time to just acknowledge, like, I think appreciation is just a part of like, it's just a part of acknowledging someone. Like, hey, I just acknowledge like you for just who you are. You don't have to do anything, but I just appreciate you just being, right? I just appreciate you as a human. I appreciate just your role in my life. Right. I'm just acknowledging that. I love that language where it just opens the door to just being vulnerable, because I think you're also letting them know in appreciating somebody else, you're letting them know, hey, I see you and I do believe like I can trust you. So that way, when you are vulnerable with them, it's not like a shock. It's not like, well, what the heck? I didn't know we was that close and you sharing all this, right? It's like legit. It's like, no, like, okay, wait, this person sees me in their life as someone important because they appreciate me all the time. They acknowledge me all the time. They validate me in their life all the time. So now when they're coming to me needing help, coming to me just needing an encouraging word, that exchange of vulnerability and transparency is a lot less shocking, we'll say. It's not as like, well, I mean, I thought we were close, but I didn't know we were that close. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that appreciation. So that, I think like just that quote is just so profound.
Thank you. And then also with me, I will say that a lot of the times I'm not very verbal with my communication, and I just assume that people know that I appreciate them and I have them around, especially because as an entrepreneur, you don't really have to have people around you that you don't want around you. And I just assume, oh, they know that I appreciate them. But I think through this process, I had no choice but to get verbal and to let them know, like, no, I appreciate you. I'm glad that you're here. I want you to be here. You're important to me. You're important to this organization, because I had no other choice. It came
Wow.
down to that. And then from there, I was able to let them know, this is what's happening. This is where I'm at. Even if it's as something small as, I'm just not here today all the way, but I'm going to show up for you the best I can. So
That's really good. I appreciate you sharing that. So when you talk about, you said earlier actually that you kind of knew what you were going to need. like you'd said something like that, where you knew you were going to need in like these moments of transition, these moments of difficulties where you said, I need church, I need my therapist, I need, community. And like, you just didn't necessarily know the extent. Where did you pick up on that to kind of know going into the transition? Like, okay, that's what I'm gonna need.
So what's hilarious is, like I said, I knew I would need it to a small extent. I didn't pick up on it first mentally. I picked up on it physically. And this is something where if you go back and look at pictures, and I think I have a video about it on my page, my entire body broke out and I have psoriasis and psoriasis plaques and breakouts, and I looked like a cheetah. And I'm not even kidding with you. At one point, I thought I was fine, and I'm looking and I'm having all of these breakouts, and my skin was insane. My body physically wasn't insane. I was not sleeping. I was taking prescription sleep meds and melatonin and tart cherry juice and magnesium, white noise, everything every night, and sleeping about an hour and a half to 2 hours a night. So my body told me first, something is not right. And if you don't let this out, and if you don't accept help, and if you don't have an outlet, then you're going to, something bad is going to happen. You're going to stress yourself to death. So it wasn't something that I necessarily came to this conclusion on my own. It was like, oh, okay, what's going on? So
Yeah, no, I definitely, what I love about that story is because we are some hard-headed people.
mhm.
And it's out of like necessity, because like we've had to be. But like literally in a lot of ways, when I think about even just like, major decisions I've made, or, the greatest relationships I've built, it's literally come from, something happening where literally like I can't escape this. Like I need to make a change. Or, and if it's in the lane of like relationships, the person would literally say, "Hey, I have your back. Like, let me help you." And it's kind of like, all right, I'm saying yes because I really want you to stop bothering me, so that way we don't have to keep doing this, right? And then it's like, oh snap, they really are helpful.
That really was helpful. Exactly. That's how I feel about some of my staff, and even some of my clients who offered the same thing. It's like, I don't think that I need it, but people are looking at you like, you need help.
Yeah.
Let us help you.
And it's so refreshing when you get the help. It's so refreshing when you're actually like, oh, okay, I can let my guard down a little bit here. I can still be my high achieving, productive self, but like, I'm not like running myself ragged. That's such a good feeling. So I'm thinking about the person listening to us right now, where they're in a space of transition and they're dealing with the emotions of overwhelm. They feel trapped almost. They feel just the pressure. What would you say to them? And you could say something totally different than, the advice you've given thus far. But what would you say to that person that came to you? They're like, "Hey, Asia, I'm in the middle of transition right now and I feel overwhelmed. I feel stressed out. Like, what should I do?"
So I will say, if anything, while you're going through a transition, sometimes our brain can go into fog and we're not thinking clearly, we're not thinking properly. I would say, first of all, sit down and reflect and allow your mind space to just open up to new opportunities, new methods of doing things, new goals, because it might be a situation where you need to pivot, but you're not even thinking clearly because you're so stressed out with the actual transition in itself. So just take a minute and step back. Think about what you're going through, have that end goal in mind, and realize that you might have to make some transitions and some pivots to get to that end goal. Don't be so stuck and married to the ways that you're doing things, and you don't realize that there's opportunities for growth in other areas, or there's opportunities for growth and ways to get around and get to that end goal without just going straight forward. So that's the thing that I would say.
That's powerful. That's powerful because we often underestimate what we can do when we just slow down. Like you're able to see a lot of opportunities when you do slow down. Of course, there's seasons, where you need to run fast, you need to, be aggressive and all these things. But there's definitely seasons, especially in transition, where it's just more important to just slow down and reflect to basically do what you said. We're kind of nearing the corner here on this, but I want to just ask you, when you think about like everything that we've discussed today, right? From obviously all the transition, your method to get through the transitions, if you could go back and just kind of who you are today, the growth that you've experienced and everything like that, the success that you're experiencing, what's like one piece of advice you would give to yourself? Like when you were in like the hardest of the hard with that 4-year period, hardest of the hard, like what would you say to yourself like today?
I would say accept that help and support faster and make sure that you just keep in mind that this is something that you're going through, which means you'll come out on the other side. So
That's
everything will be okay.
That's good. Well, I really appreciate that. Because there's people listening that need that. Because transition's happening. Like I've with a lot of the clients that I have right now, like a lot of them are literally in the middle of like in the discovery calls and just the talks and stuff like that. They're like, I'm in the middle of transition. I'm in the middle, like I'm hearing that like constantly in a lot of people's lives right now. So that's why like I thank you for just the insight you've brought to this topic. So that way the people listening, they're not just experiencing transition and they are just like, okay, I need just some encouragement, where it's like, no, you've given them tools, you've given them perspective on how to view the transition, as well as like practical steps to navigate it. And so thank you just for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I definitely think this conversation is needed. And like you said, a lot of people are going through things. A lot of people are going through those transitions. So it's important to have these conversations because when you're going through these transitions, you feel like you're going through things alone and
Yeah,
you're not. There's always someone that can be there, whether that be a Facebook community, someone that you know personally. Reach out to people, put it out there if you need help and you need support because people are out there to help. So.
I love it. Now, I know you have some fun things coming up. I know you're like relaunching a course and you're obviously doing all that you're doing with Divine Dance. You got a lot of moving pieces and things like that. Can you just tell people who want to connect with you, who want to just be inspired with you, learn more about you, connect with you, just where can they find you? How can they connect with you? How can they get with you?
For sure. If you want to go ahead and follow my Instagram page, it is Ashia Carp. I'm very active on there. Shoot me a message. I will message you back. And if you want to check out my website, www.asiaonline.com, I talk about things like goal setting. I think talk about starting a business. Like I said, how to take your passion and turn it into a profitable business. So check me out on there and connect with me.
I love it. I love it. Well, listen, for all of you who want to connect with her, I'll make sure that her information is down in the show notes below. As you guys know, we are always trying to figure out how can we take one step closer to our dream lifestyle. So if this was helpful to you, I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button. It's a very free and easy way to make sure you're connected with a resource that's going to help you grow, because anything worth having is going to require you growing for it. So as you get ready for the next time we talk, I'm going to ask you for just one favor. And that one favor is very simple. I'm just going to ask you to share this conversation with someone that you know, love, and trust, so that way they as well can take one step closer to their goals and dreams. So you do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. And always remember that your life will get better when you get better. We'll see you guys next time.